Welcome to the debut edition of the John Thomas Hill Show, and I am, well, I guess you can kind of figure out who I might be. It's John Thomas Hill. Hooray, hooray, hooray. Finally, we are on, and we're pending approval for iHeartRadio. We're hoping to get on there real soon. I'll let you know about that. But let's start off the show like I talked about last night when I was giving you the intro to the preview, I should say, of what's coming down the pipe. Obviously, Donald Trump's going to come up to the top of the list of any kind of show we do. So let's talk about Donald Trump when it comes to Afghanistan and North Korea. Afghanistan's very much in the news right now because the other day Donald Trump said that we would basically send more troops, increase our involvement over there, but really didn't say a whole lot about why we're doing that I would consider to be a really valid reason to ramp up things. To me, it's just another example of how we haven't learned the lesson the Soviets learned 30 years ago, basically, which was if you get in a land war in Afghanistan, get in, get out as quickly as you can. The biggest mistake, and I didn't expect this phone call, so hang on just a second. All right, we'll just talk over that because it's nothing major. But Donald Trump is one of those people that, quite honestly, is very naive when it comes to the nuances of foreign policy and such. And it's really one of those things that I really can't understand why Donald Trump has this ability. Can I say something right now? A complete off topic. If you're asking for prayer every single day almost, you're kind of pushing things, okay? I mean, I'm not the most pious person in the world. When I ask for prayer, it's for something pretty darn important, okay? So there's my little rant about that. Okay? All right. I don't know who this person is. I have no earthly idea. It's just one of those things. Anyhow, back to where I was. Donald Trump. Afghanistan. To sum it up very quickly, Donald Trump has to find a way to get the results we want, that we can live with, and to be able to get our troops home once and for all within a relatively specified period of time. That's what the American people want. That's what they desire most of all, is for an end to this seemingly never-ending war that's going on in Afghanistan. Obama said he would bring our troops home. For the most part, he did that, save for a few that were over there. And unfortunately, as we're finding out right now, those few troops are not enough, apparently. But the thing is, look, if we're going to stay there, we have to realize that it's going to take a very long time to get anything accomplished there. So, bear with me. That kind of caught me by surprise, that yawn. That's the wonderful thing about this show. This is not a professional show or anything like that. This is just me basically going off on a few topics and chit-chatting and whatnot. We were going to have the Facebook and all that up soon enough. I just had to figure out how to connect this show to my Facebook page for the show, not my personal Facebook page. As for North Korea, the fact of the matter is, if Donald Trump decides to do anything preliminary-wise that's a military maneuver, China is going to respond to protect their ally. But if the North Koreans were to attack the United States or one of our allies, China would basically step back and go, okay, North Korea, you want to pick a fight? There you go. You're on your own. Can North Korea win a fight on their own? And the answer is, not really. If North Korea is stupid enough to nuke a city in the United States, the response would be catastrophic. And it would not necessarily be from us. You see, the last thing China wants is for the United States to attack North Korea and to send military troops into North Korea. And even if we took the most careful, cautious strategy to avoid any possibility of attacking Chinese troops, China will look at possibility of anything coming at them because they don't know our true intentions, or they don't want to take any chances about our true intentions. Remember, this is not a game. This is a fight for life and death, basically. If we make the wrong move, thousands of Americans, perhaps even millions of Americans, could get killed. A lot of them innocent. So Donald Trump has to be very careful with this. But Donald Trump has to be more consistent. And this is where the problem with Donald Trump's entire administration. He's been anti-establishment from the very beginning. The problem is when you're anti-establishment, you fail to answer a question more often than not about, okay, you take out the establishment, what replaces that establishment? There has to be an establishment. There has to be structure. There has to be government. There has to be laws. There has to be authority. We can't live in a libertarian utopia. It just does not work. So what, pray tell, is this new establishment? From the looks of it, it's all about Trump making money off being president. I mean, he's going to his own... He's running up a Secret Service bill, the likes of which has never been seen before. He does a lot of golfing, it seems like. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just it seems like he's going to a lot of his own resorts and such to do this golfing, which puts money into his own pocket. My biggest fear is, what if the Republicans decide they've had enough? And I'm talking about the Republicans on the Hill, Capitol Hill. What if it's about Republicans who really, really matter, as in the big money people? Trump's base is never going to really leave him. It may shrink, but the hardcore Trump voters are not going anywhere. Why? Because they simply have thrown all their chips in with Donald Trump. He's not going anywhere without a fight. But the problem is, if Pence, if members of his cabinet, if Congress get tired of all of this, and they start to see him as not being able to handle the job, not being able to do the job, then, because of a constitutional amendment, they can remove him without impeachment. Will they do that? Now, you hear from time to time, oh, he's borderline Alzheimer's, borderline this, dementia, blah, 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 blah. There's no proof to any of that, okay? None. I have no idea if he has any old age health problems that could affect his ability to do the job, okay? But it would not surprise me given his diet, given the fact he doesn't really exercise, given the fact that he's had health issues before. And he is in his 70s. He's one of the oldest presidents we've ever had. The fact is, this is the most stressful job there is. And breaking news, Trump pardons Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Okay? Now, this is what pisses me off. Why in the world did he pardon him? If all what I've heard about this trial, which, admittedly, whenever a judge decides not to have a jury trial, it kind of raises, there was an appeals process. Why didn't they go through that? Instead, Arpaio jumps to his buddy Trump and gets a pardon. Okay? So, this means that someone who very well broke the law, he was convicted in court, even though it was a judge trial, which is legal, by the way, unless they agree with it. I tend to believe that you can move the trial away and put the trial somewhere else. So, anyhow, that's just me. So it's official now. Trump has pardoned Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Arizona. The one with the tents out in the desert with the prisoners and the pink underwear, blah, 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 blah. I'm all for making sure that if you commit a crime, you do the time. But humiliation doesn't really work. Okay? You want these people to bounce back and change their lives, okay? And what Sheriff Joe Arpaio was doing when he was sheriff was humiliation. It was not trying to better these people's lives that were in jail, to get them, to truly tell them not to go on the street. Because guess what? If you're a prisoner, I'll deal with it. It's maybe a bologna sandwich, but hey, it's more than 3 bologna sandwiches than I would have had on the street. And you can get used to wearing pink underwear. You can used to be sleeping in a tent out in the desert. That's the sad part about it. And that goes to a lot. I'm going to have to do a podcast on this one of these days about why our entire correction system is stupid. Why it does nothing to lessen crime, and it's even more so when it's a for-profit system, because there's now a profit motive to get people to go to jail. That'll have to come down the road another day. Maybe it'll come tomorrow. We don't know yet. I'll have to think about that. But that's breaking news. Trump has pardoned Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Now, let's get off Donald Trump for a bit and talk about the Hurricane Harvey that's going to hit Texas. It's about to hit Texas, as a matter of fact. I hope if you're listening in Texas, somewhere close to the hurricane, you're safe. If you're in anywhere in the danger areas, get out if you can. If you can't, buckle down, because it's going to get kind of rough there, to say the least. I remember Hurricane Hugo from 28 years ago. I'll never forget it. I just graduated high school the spring before. I was just started college. It was a Thursday when it struck. Thursday night. They'd already canceled college the next day because there was a concern it was going to hit our area. And for most of the night, it looked exactly like it was going to hit our area. I live in the western North Carolina foothills. For most of the night, as the storm came on shore at Charleston and headed northwest, it looked like it was going to hit us. And then, somehow or another, A high-pressure system pushed the storm due north from Columbia to Charlotte, which was like a bull in a china shop. Here is a major hurricane going through a major metropolitan area. Well, not as much as it is today, but it was booming, starting its boom back then. A lot of buildings were damaged. A lot of windows were shattered. I have a friend that was working at a radio station that night, and he told me the horrific story of having people call in describing what was going on. Flash forward to 2014 when 2 tropical storms come up the Florida Panhandle and head into western North Carolina, a place that generally does not get tropical storms. I was listening on the radio in 2004. I should say 2004, not 14, 2004. Those storms hit, and they hit hard. I can't remember if there were any deaths. There probably were a few. But looking back at Hurricane Hugo and those 2 storms in 2004, and Floyd back on the east coast of North Carolina, which was devastating back then, it's only a matter of time before another major storm hits the Carolinas. And I have a friend that lives out in Myrtle Beach. I've known people who've gone to UNC Wilmington. I've known people that have gone to East Carolina. So the next few weeks really is the heart of the hurricane season in this area. I remember, of course, Hurricane Katrina. I wasn't anywhere near New Orleans, but I do know somebody who had to evacuate to Auburn, Alabama because of that hurricane. She lived there for a few years before moving back. The weekend after was DragonCon. That was my first DragonCon. A big gathering of geeks, not nearly as big as it is today. And I will never forget, as we were leaving on the last day of Labor Day, was the last day of the convention, and we were all leaving, the refugees of the hurricane were coming in. The evacuees, whatever you want to call them. They were coming in and trying to survive. Many went west to Houston. Some went north to Memphis. These went east to Atlanta. It was heartbreaking. It had been a great weekend until you started realizing people were coming in to the city to escape what was at the time one of the worst storms ever to hit North America. And it nearly destroyed an entire city. If you remember back to 2005, there were discussions about whether or not to simply evacuate New Orleans and simply declare it destroyed. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but things happen. Lives were lost in Katrina. It was a complete breakdown of societal order. It was scary. But we have rebuilt to a degree, not nearly as much as we should. There's still a need there. Hopefully, one day it'll be addressed. We don't know when. But anyhow, that's my story. All right, on to happier things. Somewhat. I mentioned yesterday there was a report about a umpire, Angel Hernandez, I believe his name is, who ejected Detroit Tigers' Ian Kinsler for arguing. And Ian Kinsler went, as some players do, to the media and basically loudly complained about it. And to the point where the World Umpires Association decided to threaten to, or actually didn't threaten, they actually did put white armbands on as a show of unity before they stopped when the commissioner, Rob Manfred, decided to hold a meeting with these umpires. Here's my take on it. The umpires have a point to a degree. Players and coaches and managers should respect the refs. But this is professional baseball. This is the big leagues. There's a lot of pressure out there. A lot of money is on the line every single game. There's, people want the home team to win. And the home team wants to give them a win. The problem with this is that you take away the ability to draw attention to when umpires are bad. I was a scorekeeper on the American Legion team a few decades ago, back in the late 80s, early 90s. There were a few officials who, looking back, were blatantly biased against us. Whether it was our manager, whether it was because they didn't like the town we came from, or maybe just the fact they didn't like the team for some reason. Umpires have to be worthy of respect. They have to uphold a higher standard. And it's been my experience that there are too many umpires in baseball who let their egos run amok. Not all of them. The vast majority are pretty good. But there seems to be a proclivity amongst umpires to not take crap from anybody, which I can understand that to a certain degree. But when you are clearly in the wrong, and I was looking at a video not too long ago of a Chicago White Sox pitcher, and I cannot remember the name of him right offhand, who did not balk twice, but was called for a balk by the same first base umpire, Joe West. You may know who I'm talking about on the pitcher if you happen to hear about that. I can't remember the pitcher's name. I watched both pitches, or both pickoff attempts, I should say. Neither one was a balk. Excuse me. Had to yawn there for a second. So anyhow, my take is you have to have accountability. Umpires have to be graded. Those grades should be acknowledged. There shouldn't be some sort of, vague qualifications or criteria to determine who goes to umpire in the postseason. And there's breaking news. Sebastian Gorka resigns as Deputy Assistant to the President. That's not a real surprise. We will talk about that tomorrow. I'll let that kind of simmer for a little bit. And why I think that his new Chief of Staff, Trump's new Chief of Staff, General Kelly, is pushing some people out the door, so to speak. And that might actually be a good thing. But back to the umpires for a second there. Umpires have to be held to a higher standard. They have to call the game as they see it. And unfortunately, I've seen plenty of times when that doesn't happen. Not just in Major League Baseball, but all levels of baseball. Better training is needed. Better criteria for umpires is needed. So, there you go. There's no easy answers. But Major League Baseball has to hold their umpires accountable. If they make a mistake, hold them accountable. If they are unfairly picking on a particular team or player or manager or whatnot, and there's clear evidence of that, there should be action. No matter what league it is. If officials are picking against a team in the NBA and deciding to make calls against that team, and they're blatant about it, they should be sanctioned, if not fired. Same with the NFL, NHL, whatever league. All right. Now on to the geek stuff. Star Trek Discovery. Some of you may really be looking forward to this show. It's on CBS All Access, which is the CBS's new streaming service. It's exclusive to there. I think the first episode will be aired on CBS, but every subsequent episode afterward will be aired on CBS All Access. Okay? There's a lot more to CBS All Access than Star Trek Discovery. There's every other Star Trek series. There's a lot of other shows that CBS produced. But I want to talk about Discovery. I've seen the trailers. And this is just me. Period. They left me feeling flat. They really did. And it just does not feel like anything exciting. This is supposed to be like 10 years before the original Star Trek, and doesn't look anything like the original Star Trek. Okay? How do you explain it? I know a lot of Star Trek fans who are very hardcore about the canon. They don't like the new Star Trek movies. Here's my take. Star Trek needs a long rest. A long rest. Maybe finish out the current series of movies. Let the current cast have one or two more films, and then let them ride off into the star set, so to speak. But Discovery, if it doesn't succeed, there shouldn't be another series for 20 years. At least. Don't get tempted to it. There's a lot of competition out there now. There's a lot of good science fiction out there. The Expanse. I almost forgot the name. The Expanse is probably the best sci-fi show out there right now. The fantasy, Game of Thrones, obviously. There's House of Cards. There's The Americans. There's Walking Dead. There's plenty of others. And especially now with streaming, you can watch anything past or present and binge on it. So you're dealing with competition not just now, but in the past. So you're not only dealing with competition from, say, 2016, 2017, you're dealing with competition from 20, 30, 40 years ago, when those shows didn't have to do with competition except from other networks. And those were very few. There were only 3 back then. You know, I'm old when I remember there was only 3 networks. Yeah, there was PBS too, and there was independent stations, but primarily there were 3 networks. And now you can pretty much watch anything online with very few exceptions. You want to watch a TV show that you saw in 1970, you can find it somewhere to stream, either legally or illegally. So, anyhow. Now, since we have a little bit extra time, I'm not going to do the whole hour tonight. I may save that for tomorrow. I kind of wanted to get this show under my feet, get my feet wet. I have to say this. I watched Katy Perry's video for her latest song, Swish, Swish, Bish. This goes for a lot of pop music. First of all, when I want to listen to a song, I want to listen to that performer. Not just a guest that interrupts the performer to sing a mini song in the song. You want to do a duet, call it a duet. But it's leaked over from hip-hop, which hip-hop, the main reason I'm not really much of a hip-hop fan is it does the same thing. It's sort of like, hey, let's get all these people to be on a song, but let's say Nicki Minaj has 3 different rappers in her song, and she's barely singing except for like the first part. But there are some very good pop stars out there. Adele, of course, is sensational. Katy Perry, for the most part, is actually pretty good, but she's starting to fall into that trap of, hey, let's get a guest star on every single song I do. To do a little rap session or whatever. Taylor Swift's pretty good. She's okay. I kind of find her a little annoying, but her music's pretty good. But a lot of pop music is sort of... I mean, Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato, to be perfectly honest, I can't really tell them apart. Same problem I have with country music with men. It's like, who are these people? They all sound the same. The ladies have a little differentiation, not much. Of course, they're the Dixie Chicks, who are sort of like the prodigal daughters of country music. And that's an understatement. But let's face it. A lot of music these days is horribly overproduced. It's not really that original. It's sort of boring and bland. Rap was great in the 80s. Even the gangster rap, there was a reason why it was powerful the way it was. Now it's about Cristal and bling and ladies and not really that creative. There are some rappers who are different, of course. I'm not much into the rap game, so not all rappers are bad. But a lot of them are not really that good either. Because it just doesn't have the originality that you saw back when it first started out in the 70s and 80s. So, anyhow, that's my little take on it. I mean, when you got young people telling me they listen to music of my era, the 70s and 80s, save for disco, which hopefully they will abandon because disco sucks. Thank you, God bless you, Steve Dahl, for Disco Demolition Night. May you receive your sainthood upon your passing, which hopefully is many, many years down the road. Thank you very much. And I will get into Steve Dahl's Disco Demolition Night one of these days, because I consider that one of the most phenomenal things that ever happened. I was too young to realize what was going on. I was 8 at the time. And but I've heard plenty about it and such. Here's the reason I hate disco. I didn't particularly care for my second grade teacher. Okay? It's a long story. It's not that I really hated her. It's just every morning she would turn on the radio before class started and play the most annoying disco music. And one time my mom had the brilliant idea. I love you, Mom, but I gotta bust your chops on this, okay? She dressed me up in a leisure suit to go to school. If you don't know what a leisure suit is, Google it. In the words of Conrad Thompson, the great podcaster, throw it in your Google machine. You'll find out the horror that my mom, my dear beloved mom, God rest her soul, but I hope she got a peg down on the great mansions in the sky because of the abomination she put me through by going to school in a leisure suit. Okay? Yes, I'm joking about that. I'm not joking about the fact she actually did send me to school in a leisure suit. And it was rather embarrassing. So, I love my mom. She's no longer with us. Hadn't been with us for 10 years. But, God bless it, she shouldn't have done that. And to this very day, I hate disco. I can't watch the original Battlestar Galactica because it reminds me too much of disco. I can't watch the original Buck Rogers because it reminds me too much of disco. It's stupid, I know, but it's the truth. And I don't like disco. Okay. Some of you are going out there going, why don't you like disco? What about YMCA? I've heard that song so many times. Every time it comes on, I just want to punch the cowboy, the Indian, and the police officer in there. I hope it's not a legit police officer. It's a guy in a... If you've seen Village People, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, throw it in your Google machine as the great Conrad Thompson from Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and What Happened When with Tony Schiavone and whatever show they have come up next. Speaking of that, going into wrestling for a bit. In my old job, I changed jobs not too long ago, but in my old job, I was able to listen to podcasts during work. And I'd been listening to 2 podcasts on a regular basis about wrestling. Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, who was a former WWE official, high-ranking as in one of the creative team members, and probably the closest to Vince of anybody save for Kevin Dunn, who mainly heads the TV department. He was there from 88 till 2008, I think it was, for almost 20, somewhat, maybe longer than 20 years, with a brief period of time in the early 90s where he left. He was fired and rehired, but he left for about a year. It's a great podcast, talks about the golden age of the late 80s with Hulk Hogan, the difficulties of the 90s, the Attitude Era, when the WWE blasted out of its hole that the WCW had put it in during the Monday Night Wars and sent it to even greater heights than it ever dared imagine, to where right to the ruthless aggression era of John Cena and others, Eddie Guerrero and things like that. It's a great podcast. I highly recommend it. Same for Tony Schiavone's podcast. He is the voice of WCW. Save for a year when he went to WWE. And he's very painfully honest. And I'm going to be painfully honest right here. Tony Schiavone was great up until probably about a year or two before the end of WCW. Maybe even longer than that. I think he saw the writing on the wall and he mailed it in. He was not really that good. And I think it goes to say that when you know that writing is on the wall, you don't put your best foot forward. Do I blame him? No. My feeling is that Tony Schiavone, is second only to Jim Ross. Well, I take that back. Third behind Joey Styles. It's Jim Ross, Joey Styles, and Tony Schiavone when it comes to play-by-play guys on TV. Gorilla Monsoon's fourth. And the reason I put Gorilla Monsoon that low is because Gorilla Monsoon was the kind of guy that he was basically the only wrestling. He may have been able to do boxing too. Jim Ross could have called anything. Tony Schiavone, same deal. He calls baseball now for the minor league Gwinnett Braves. Joey Styles could do football or basketball or baseball and do really, really well if he really wanted to do that. I don't think he's really interested in that. I think he did something for the Yankees not too many years ago. I don't know if he still does it or not. I think nowadays he's gotten out of the wrestling business. He left WWE, and then there was a thing last year where he made a joke that was seemingly sexist, and he got fired from a couple of independent promotions, which, I understand sort of why they did it, but at the same time, I heard the joke. It was rather bad taste, but it wasn't approving of Donald Trump's grabbing of a certain part of the female anatomy, okay? And we won't go into that for right now, anyhow. Finally tonight, a special comment about the fact that we simply don't talk to one another anymore. We don't compromise. We don't take other people's views and kind of go, well, maybe they're right about certain things about it. We live in an era where it's our way or the highway, where we think that we know everything and that the experts don't know anything. We're not supposed to believe in the mainstream media that actually have practiced journalism, although plenty of journalists aren't practicing it as well as they should. And I'll go into that one of these days, maybe even tomorrow. But in general, the media tends to get it right far often than it gets it wrong. But when you have right-wing, and in some cases left-wing, propaganda networks, you're seeing them on Facebook. Blatantly, obviously, biased reporting. I've seen my friends comment and share these stories, and I'm going, you do realize that's garbage. That's bullcrap, right? And my Democratic friends do the same thing sometimes. Here's the thing. If you're not someone who has built a resume, you're just some guy with a computer, like me, who can find somebody that'll go, oh, they'll spin a story. And you put it on a blog, but you've not confirmed that story by multiple sources, like traditional journalists should do and have done in the past, but for some reason, because of the fact that there's such a press to be first with a story in this 24/7 news cycle, that doesn't always occur, and that's where part of the problem is. But when you have the Daily Caller, people believing the Daily Caller is a legitimate news service, when in fact they're basically right-wing version of Huffington Post, if not worse, more biased. Here's the thing I found about right-wing media, like Fox News, like Newsmax, like Daily Caller, and a bunch of these others. They're overcompensating for a perceived liberal bias. How liberal is the media? Not as much as you think. Now, it is true that when you're based out of New York, you're tending to view the world from a New York perspective, which tends to be more liberal than the perspective of Middle America, rural America. Throughout civilization and history, rural areas tend to be more conservative than urban areas. Why is that? It's harder to have your opinion changed when you're facing off against fewer people, especially when those in power have only a certain group to cater to stay in power. Most rural areas are white and conservative. Most urban areas are multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-religious. So you have to appeal to a broader audience. When you appeal to a broader audience, you tend to move more toward the left. I can probably do a research project on this from a sociological point of view, but I'm not a college student anymore, and I only took sociology once. Did get a B in it, but I'd rather not go back into that. Anyhow, I blabbed on enough for today. Tomorrow we're going to have the show sometime. I'm not sure what time. Probably tomorrow evening. Maybe the same time. 8 o'clock, I'm not sure. Just stay tuned. If you've enjoyed it, keep checking in from time to time. And if you didn't, well, hopefully we'll get better. But as I always said in my other podcast before I started this one, this will be my only podcast I will do. And there'll be plenty of things I'll do here, some of which you'll like, some of which you won't. But as we always like to say here, it's good night, good luck, and may the good news be yours.